Okay, I am now here with Jim Clark, who is one of our Alchemy Mastermind members. And I asked Jim if he could share his experience over the last few months working together. And my hope is that by hearing where he came from and how he's tackled a lot of the challenges that he started with in his practice, you'll also get some great ideas about how you can do the same thing too. So Jim, thanks for taking the time today.
My pleasure.
All right, great. Maybe you can start out by letting some of the folks know a little about your practice, the kind of practice, where you're located, who you serve, and stuff like that, so we can kind of get a view into you and your business.
Okay, sure. Yeah, my practice is located in New York. Practice pretty much throughout the New York metro area. General practice is where I've been, with a focus on real estate and commercial type matters, and basically that was it. I was a generalist, jack of all, doing everything and nothing at the same time.
Right. Good. So before we started working together and you joined our program, why don't you tell us a little bit about what the practice was like? I know you're a generalist, but what were some of the challenges you were having? What were some of the things that were, difficult and that you wanted to tackle in the practice to grow it?
Okay. Well, basically, it was booming. The practice was booming, had a lot of work, but I felt more like a victim of the practice. Situations were kind of out of my hands. And the clients were controlling what got done, when got done, different things, all events other than myself, including the people working for me. And basically, at some point, we had the conversation about, being the guy supervising the factory versus the factory floor. Mm-hmm. And I was not only on the factory floor, but I was the factory floor. And that's pretty much the way it was, and then until it was one night I was standing on a football field watching my son practice, dealing with client emails and whatnot, and I actually got one of your emails, saying see if you can qualify for a 10-minute call, and I said, what the hell, and then the rest is history, really.
Great. Well, I'm certainly glad that you made that call. And before we started working together, it seems like it was 24/7. It was a lot of you were not really in charge. What would have happened, do you feel, to your practice if you hadn't taken charge of your own future?
I think pretty much more of the same. I would have been doing the same thing, basically running a mile a minute. Mm-hmm. I think it would have grown, the practice, because you always just find a way to dig deeper and do more. That's just the way I do it. But I don't think I would have been able to get it to the next level. And it would have continued like that basically until I couldn't physically handle it when I got older or wasn't interested. And at that point, my income would drop, and that would be my legal career. End of story.
Right. And I also remember initially when we first talked, you had some healthy skepticism that things could really be different. I think you were ready for a change, but you weren't really sure that it could happen. Maybe tell me a little bit about how you felt that way when we first talked.
Well, yeah, I had quite a bit of skepticism. Basically just coming from where I've come from, which is basically a family of self-made people and do-it-yourselfers, and if you want it done right, you do it yourself kind of a thing. Anytime I've ever mentioned anything to anybody in my family about, possibly getting help to do anything, they're like, you could probably do it better yourself, and that's really where I was coming from. But at the same time, the things that were being said and where I needed to go, it just sounded like this is exactly what I needed to do.
Good. And then, you said really the practice was running you at that point instead of you being the CEO of your firm. So why don't we talk about some of the progress you've made? I mean, you've really only been in the program, about 4 months now. Let's talk about some of the progress you've made in just 4 months and changing things. Maybe we'll start with you being in charge and managing your calendar, because I know you've really taken to heart some of the delegation liberation stuff and a lot of the control of your calendar that we work on. So tell me how that's changed in terms of you controlling the business.
Well, basically I just started with the materials on that portal. Basically, you guys recommended that I start with the basics and maybe delegation liberation, and I went through those programs. They made a lot of sense, and then what I did is I basically called my first official firm meeting. All three of us, and and we just I just said this is the way things are going to be from this day forward, and I got resistance because I've been in practice for over 10 years, and everything was kind of loosey-goosey up until then, and everybody kind of did what they wanted to do, and we got work done. Clients were always happy, but it wasn't working for me. And from that point forward, we started with the little things. Because you can't do everything. You want to feed somebody a salami in law school, they tell you got to feed it to them slice by slice.
Right.
And so we started with little things like how do we handle phone traffic, and we came up with a system for that. Didn't really work all that good, so we tweaked it a little, and we kept tweaking it until we got that right. Then we started having everybody document what they were doing, making checklists, and then before you know it, within a month, because basically I told everyone we're doing at least one checklist a day for the next 30 days. By the end of a month, we had a binder full of checklists. And, it was a lot of legwork for me up front because I had to check everything, make sure it was right, make sure it was something useful. But all of a sudden now I have an operations manual after a month. In addition to that, what else did we do? I did the delegation liberation.
Your call handling also.
Exercises.
Right.
Yeah, that was a big deal, the call handling, because with that, I guess doing that weekly planner every week, I would track the interrupts, as it says you should, and right off the bat, there was probably about 10 to 20 interrupts a day of phone calls. So that was the biggest interruption. So that was the thing we handled first. Next thing, the biggest interrupts was actually my assistant, who would just basically come through and, whenever a question came up, and I tracked those, and then we knocked that one out. We came up with a system. Actually, what we do now, which I hadn't mentioned before, is we set up one-on-one times every day. We're at scheduled time where we sit down and you go through all your questions. You have a question, save it for then, unless it's an emergency. And just how quiet the office has got has been unbelievable. And
that's awesome.
During that time, there's all kinds of stuff we can get done then.
That's great. That's great. And so I mean, it sounds like you started with the baseline material, the foundational stuff that we have in the program, and you just knocked the dominoes down one by one, and then you started adapting it to your particular needs. So you took the framework, and then which as a framework works, but then you made it your own, and you just kind of methodically went through them all. That's
right. Yeah, the framework was basically the foundation of everything. But everybody has their own way of doing things, and filling in the details and whatnot, and that's what I did, and it seems to be working so far. We're still early into it. Yeah, that's great. And you also worked a bunch on the positioning, right? So one piece you tackled was the operations, the communications, all that, and you're starting to work also on your positioning as well. Can you tell me a little bit about that? Yeah, basically just trying to hone in, because like I said, I started out as a generalist, and I always had this focus on real estate. My background's in real estate. I'm an investor myself, and commercial things. And with that, and with my client list, who I like to work with, who I can make the most money with, I started honing in on the matters that I really want to work on. And from there, we went through the unique practice process. And I happen to do it with the fixed fee formula materials, just because it was just too curious of me just to let that program just sit there in the portal. So I ended up spending a good part of my Christmas break going through that, which was great. And I learned a lot from it, and I incorporated it into the unique practice process.
Fantastic. And tell me, that's really honestly a lot of great progress in just a few months. What would be helpful, I think, for anyone listening is to understand how you've started thinking differently about your practice. What are some of the kind of the things that you've learned about how you think about your practice, which changed through this process?
Well, the way I think about it is more like a business. I mean, it's the things that I do on a day-to-day basis. If it's like a one-off type of thing I'm doing for a client, for some reason now it just doesn't feel as good as when I'm making some kind of process along with it. Mm-hmm. And that's a completely different mindset. I've never really had that. It was always got to get this done, got to get it out the door. Now it's like I got to get this done, but you know what? I've done this 5 times over the course of the last year. Why don't I document something so then maybe I can have my associate do it next time? Mm-hmm. And that's been a huge change. Right. And now you have the space to do it because you're not getting interrupted all the time. That's right. That's exactly right. Good. And from all this change so far, what's been the biggest effect on you and your personal time, the time with your family? I mean, you mentioned that it started out with a realization at your son's football game. How's that affected the personal side for you? Well, I've been a little bit more ruthless about my personal time since starting the program. At least initially, I was cutting out that free time, as the productivity system, tells you should do, and I was doing it, and it was really something else. I was home every night for dinner with the kids. I was doing other things during the day. I was taking my wife out to lunch every now and then. It was completely different. That's how it started initially, but then as I was, the past month or two, I've been trying to ramp up more, and I've been spending more of that free time setting up more processes. I have another employee starting next week, so I'm trying to get ready for things like that. But the framework is there. I mean, the die is cast. It's pretty much a done deal. That's the way things are now. That's great. And just to kind of wrap up really quickly, because this has been incredibly insightful, I think, for anyone who's just thinking of taking action and just kind of not sure where to start. What would you say to anyone else who's kind of on the fence about really just taking initiative, really just going for it like you have to make their practice better? Well, they ought to take a real good hard look at it. I mean, if you're talking about somebody that's already in the program, they're paying good money for it. They should take advantage of it because if the value is far going to exceed whatever you're going to pay. For someone that's just thinking about getting into it, take a good hard look at where you're at and where you think you want to be, 5 years, 3 years, 10 years from now. And if you're happy with it, or if you think you want to try making a change, because it's definitely possible. And there's a framework in place, and you could stand on the shoulders of giants and get it done, like the rest of us. That's great. Awesome, Jim. So I appreciate it. I think this is going to be super helpful to anyone who listens and gets inspired by all you've had to accomplish in just a few months to really change things and get control of your business. So thank you very much. Thank you.